So many of you will know our next storyteller, Wendy Paton, from her volunteer activities, her teaching, and her kinder music. I know Wendy as one of the illustrious members of the highly successful and sought-after music group called Sideways. Drawing on information from family, friends, and former patients in the true Kitty Kelly style, the daughter-in-law of Dr. Paton will now describe the life of this dedicated and highly respected doctor. Let's welcome Wendy Paton.
I just have a few things that if you want to look at later, you can. And most of the pictures that are the old pictures anyway, were taken with this camera. So, there's the camera, if anybody's a camera buff. Okay, get this thing the right way. Okay, good morning. It's my honor to share with you memories of a fine, fine man. I didn't know him very long, but he was a wonderful person. Nora Ann and David are here today to answer any questions you may have and to keep me in line with the facts. Dr. Paton died 48 years ago at 83 years old, but he's still remembered and talked of to this very day. There were about 400 people at his funeral, and it was a really dreary day in April. I remember nothing from the funeral itself. The thing that impressed me was as we came out of the church behind the coffin, there was his good friend Sandy Brown, dressed in a top hat, who had come out of retirement to do the funeral for his friend. There was an honor guard on the steps and the sidewalk composed of the poor and street people in our city. They stood with caps in hand. What a tribute. James Patterson Paton's parents were missionaries in China with the Bible Society of Scotland. Jim was born in Glasgow, Scotland, February 20th, 1885, while his parents were home on furlough. He was the second youngest in a family of 7. The family was then assigned to the Kettle Valley, Grand Forks, BC area. It was here his youngest brother was born. The family moved back to Eastern Ontario in 1897. The doctor had a childhood in a remote area, and I think maybe that is why he loved Kenora so much. The doctor graduated from the University of Toronto in 1910 as a physician and surgeon. Then it was time to make a decision about where he would practice on his own. Laurie found some memoirs in the museum archives that apparently were an interview of the doctor. I came to Kenora in June 1912, and all the way down, my mind was on BC, where I used to live. A classmate had wired me to come to Kenora as he wanted to go to Fort William. I was to be associated with Dr. W.J. Gunn, who was the CPR medical officer. Medical contract from Winnipeg to Fort William, with doctors at Dryden and Ignace as well. The territory I covered was from Molson to Eagle River, sickness, maternity, and accidents. I had a year at St. Catharines as the lone intern in a practice, and was very lucky to be given lots to do by the staff there, surgery, accident, and medical work. I felt I was fairly well equipped to carry on. However, a person soon gets deflated when he gets on his own. I felt equal to any surgery which would likely come up at the time: appendix, hernia, perforated ulcer, and fractures. Most of my work was with the CPR, but in the winter I made trips to lumber camps by horse and sleigh. The medical officer from Fort William saw a case which he said was chickenpox. Another case showed up 2 or 3 weeks later. I was accused for not quarantining the original case of smallpox. I informed the MO that he had called this case chickenpox. I had previously nursed smallpox and felt that I knew something about it. However, the man got away without being vaccinated and quarantined and went off up the lake to a lumber camp about 110 miles. I had to follow and vaccinate everywhere he had stopped. This was late spring. On the way back, one of our team broke loose and headed back to town. Being rather used to riding bareback, I picked a horse and started after him. He went through the ice at Sioux Narrows, but with the help of the Indian people, I got him out. I had finally caught up with him after a cold 23-mile chase, but news reached town before they did. Flu epidemic, 1918. Every night after 8 p.m., they would run a light freight and stop at section houses while I saw the sick. One night east toward Eagle River and then west toward Whitemouth the next night. They would arrange a freight to pick me up, and after a meal I would sleep in Kenora. This lasted for several weeks. One time, they would not let me off for a maternity case, and the conductor was held out of service for 2 weeks. No hard feelings on either side. Those maternity cases, the doc would get a call to catch the next freight, and off he would go. The lady usually had the kitchen table prepared for the delivery if it was still imminent. The doctor would ask her to lie on her side and would help her deliver the baby. All would be cleaned up, and she would usually serve him a meal before he caught the next freight. One of those freight baby catches was Lloyd Carlson, born in Whitemouth in 1932. How did those freights arrive on time? Lloyd also had his tonsils removed in Kenora by the good doctor when he was about 4 years old, so that was part of early practice in Kenora. The doctor returned east in 1917 and married Olive McGilvery. I wonder what an eastern girl thought of this remote town of Kenora. She was a city girl. They had 2 boys, James in 1918 and Thomas in 1920. Sadly, Olive passed away from consumption or tuberculosis in 1923. The doctor was left with 2 young boys to raise. So he contacted his sister Ella, who had been married to a missionary in China and was now widowed and still living in China. Ella came with her family of 5. Good thing that house at 301 3rd Street site was large. And that's what it looked like till just a bit ago. The doctor continued to work hard at his practice and give his boys the best. I'm sure it was rather difficult. Well, there was this nurse, the daughter of a CPR engineer, who came to work in Kenora named Mary Olivia Graham. She caught the eye of the doctor, and the feeling was mutual. So in 1926, the doctor asked for her hand in marriage. Here is the letter he wrote to his future father-in-law, whom he had never met. Remember, Winnipeg was a long way away. So Kenora, it's written on the Scoville gun, Paton gun letterhead. Kenora, Ontario, October 3rd, 26th. Mr. W.H. Graham, Winnipeg man. Dear Mr. Graham, this letter from a stranger may come as a surprise to you. I heard you were away on holidays and waited until you returned to Winnipeg before writing. As you know, and have likely heard, I am a doctor in Kenora, and your daughter Mary and I have become well acquainted. In fact, so much so that she has agreed to become my wife. I felt, though, that it is only common courtesy to write you asking you to consent to our agreement. Now here's the clincher. I feel certain you will do this as you are as interested as I am in her future happiness. I informed Mary she was letting herself in for quite a handful, as I have 2 small boys already who need a mother's care very badly, but she is quite content to put up with the work. And so he goes on to say, you don't know me, and she'll come and inform me about things. So they were married June 1927, and there were 13 lucky guests at the wedding because it was a long, wonderful marriage. Well, where do you go on a honeymoon when you are a doctor in high demand? The doctor took his prospective bride out on the lake and taught her a little about traveling in a canoe. She had been raised in Port Arthur, Fisherton, and Winnipeg, not exactly canoeing country. The canoe was packed with all you needed to survive in the bush, and they went on a canoe trip up the English River. They would stop in and buy food at the towns along the way. So there's the honeymoon suite. No one would be able to reach them this way. And there's the doctor with the fire and Mrs. Paton. and the two of them together. Now, you can see there's a string in there. That's this camera that he took the picture with. No one would be able to reach them this way, other than the black flies. Mrs. Paton said that the black flies were absolutely horrible, but of course she'd never been camping before either. Now, when Ella left with her children, the doctor told her to take everything that she needed to set up her home in Toronto. One amusing thing that Mrs. Paton told me, she said, that she did. She even left me a rolling pin with only one handle. And she used it all her life. That was her rolling pin. Jim and Mary had 3 children. Mary Isabel, or most of you know as Mary Bell, Nora Ann, and David Graham. So I asked David, your dad was so busy, when did you ever see him? Well, Dad would get up early and put on a big pot of Scottish oatmeal for all of us, not a favorite with the kids. If you were early, you might get to see him, but he was off to work as soon as possible. But he was home for as many meals as possible, and there were family times around dinner, the noon meal, and supper. David got his practice learning to drive a car by driving his dad to his home visits. David had a love for cars, so this he really liked doing. The doctor always had a fairly new car, and during the 2 wars, he would have one of the few cars in town. The doctor purchased a camp. It is situated between Big Stone Bay and Root Bay. That log building made from huge trees is still down there on the waterfront. During the summers, the whole family spent their time at the camp. The doctor came out on Wednesdays with supplies. Into those Wednesdays, he packed a lot of activity. He spent time with the children, teaching them things like rowing. He repaired things around camp. He loved to build items, but refrained from doing it most of the time because he was afraid that he might injure his hands and thus his surgical skills. During the polio epidemic, he slept at the hospital and did not go to camp at all. So there he is doing a little sawing. Now, the children said I should mention that their dad had 2 very favorite weeks a year. One was when he went hunting with his buddies, including Rip MacDonald, Bob Rose, and Unc George Mosier, as well as others. The other one was the Bonspiel Week in Winnipeg. He served as vice president of the Manitoba Curling Association, but never president because he lived in Kenora. Now, when we came back to Kenora, people hear my name's Paton, I have to be put in the right slot. Yes, Dr. Paton was my father-in-law. Out would come the stories. These stories showed how skilled, kind, and dependable, and passionate, and what a gentleman this doctor was. Rotary meetings, Monday noon, he attended every week if he possibly could. He was a life member of the Manitoba Curling Association. Those were the days when you took your own rocks with you, so if you went to Winnipeg, you took the rocks. Sue Johnson has those rocks. He loved to row and belonged to the Kenora Rowing Club. He also loved to golf, and David said he had a wicked slice. He would take his children on hunting trips. David said that you would have to hold onto the dog. Oops, we'll get there. Because he was eager but not well trained. And I must say, to this day, the Patons spoil their animals well. The doctor was always reading and keeping up with the latest advancements in his profession. His words, a doctor can now do more than to bring babies into the world and pronounce men dead. In his record books, there were many unnamed people. Even though they were unable to pay, he treated them and recorded the treatment. He would often be paid in farm produce, such as a sack of turnips that arrived from Old Joe every year. Not a popular payment, especially with Tom. What he liked the best was when OHIP happened. No longer did he have to charge anybody. Conversation on the front porch, spring 1965, which was directed at me. We were being married that year. I was a rather shy person at that time. So what do you think of these newfangled birth control pills? Are you going to take them? He was always to the point. Someone told me about his visits to their home when they were under quarantine. He brought games along for the children to play. Mary Saunders, who now resides at Pinecrest, daughter of Colonel McLeod of the shoe store. Mary, as a child, cut open her arm with a long cut, and the doctor sent her dad back to the store to get a shoebox. While her dad was away, the doctor taped the cut closed. This would be back in the 1920s, a long time ago. Then, when the shoebox arrived, he slid it open, taped it around her arm, and kept it immobile. And when I was talking to her earlier, she said, "Look, no scar." Pearl Bannister broke her leg as a young person. It was a very bad break and had to be operated on. He warned her, "You might have a limp." This your girl said to me, "Look, no limp." A nurse told me he treated us like princesses. He was so good to us. We couldn't say that about all the doctors. Nusha Diness, or as we know her, Frances, worked for the Patons around the house and babysat David sometimes. She always sings the doctor's praises as to what a fine gentleman was. He would come to pick her up, open and close the car door, and do the same thing when he drove her home. She said, "I was just a young, not so important immigrant girl," but to the doctor, everyone was treated with the utmost respect. I was singing at a funeral about 10 years ago. A gentleman came up to me when he heard my name and he said, "Your father-in-law is the reason I'm walking on 2 legs today." He said he could hear the doctors discussing his case on the other side of the curtain, and the consensus was that his leg should be amputated. Dr. Paton vehemently objected and said there were more things to try, and obviously he was right. Bert Sana told me that after she and Ted were married, she was feeling rather horrible, and Ted wasn't up to snuff either. Everyone was trying to tell her she was pregnant. She said no. So one night when she was particularly bad, they called the doctor, and he entered their home and immediately threw all the doors and windows open. He realized they were suffering from carbon monoxide poisoning. Dr. Paton's surgical skills were the finest. He used to go to the Mayo Clinic regularly and operate. Probably both he and the clinic benefited. He was asked to move there permanently, but he loved Kenora too much and wouldn't go. A story came in from St. Catharines, Ontario, where a young baby was bleeding from both ends, and he had his large intestine folding over his little, and the doctor had never done the operation. Nobody in Kenora had ever done it, but he figured that was it, and that gentleman is alive today. When there were alcoholic beverages left over in the house, he was a practical man. He would take, and all the ones that looked the same color went into the same bottle. Each person seeking help was helped. Lorna Reed had the doctor call on her at school and took her off to the hospital and removed her appendix. Joyce Ploman Wartig had double pneumonia, and he brought her the Dion quintuplet book to share. Her father, Carl, was an engineer, and you would get sparks in your eyes, and you called up the doctor anytime, night or day, and he would remove them. Ann Baker, who's here today, was skipping up the street, and a little boy with a wagon ran into her, and the doctor was called, and he was gentle and loving and stitched up her leg and assured her everything would be okay. There's a plaque honoring the doctor's gun, Paton and gun, at the Railway Museum. What a life this man put into his 83 years. He loved and nurtured his children. He treated his wife with the utmost respect. Never did I hear a word that did not honor her. He encouraged his children to be the best they could. He helped everyone he could. He enjoyed everything life could offer him. And as a result, in 1962, he was honored by a reception with the town of Kenora on the occasion of 50 years service, and it was standing room only. There were people everywhere. He received the Order of Canada for his exemplary life. And I'm sure there were other honors, but he never thought anything about honors. He just thought he just did his job, and what he did wasn't especially wonderful. In the last year of his life, there was a lady who would have no other doctor attend her childbirth. Yes, there was a call in the middle of the night, and off to the hospital the doctor went. When he returned home, he had a big smile on his face, and he also got to help deliver his youngest son because there was no other doctor available. He loved his job. Now this is the last picture that was taken about a month or two before he died. So I leave you with a chuckle. 3 days before the doctor died, he asked Mary to call the ambulance because he needed to go. He knew he needed to go to the hospital. She made that call. But when they came, she had to say, "I'm sorry, Charlie Clifton. You will have to sit down for a minute. The doctor has gone down to the office to tend to some last-minute business." David said his dad knew he wasn't coming back, and there was something important that had to be signed or recorded. And as I say, I didn't know the doctor for that many years, but the 2 youngest children are here, and they can And for those of you who knew Tom and Helene still lives out in Vancouver. She's not that well, but she's still living out in Vancouver.